Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast with me, Aaron Stokes. And this afternoon I'm joined by BBC Radio Newcastle presenter Matthew Raisbeck to look back at Sunday's fantastic win on the South Coast against Southampton. Matthew, I don't know about you, but I think it's going to take a while yet for it to sink in that Newcastle United are a real force. I think every time you think that, they could have a potential banana peel in front of them, they just managed to get through it. And even though they weren't at their brilliant best yesterday, they still managed to pull off what was another resounding victory. You were obviously on the South Coast yesterday commentating with John Anderson. First and foremost, what did you make of the performance?
Well, thanks, Aaron, for having me. It's good to be with you again. Yeah, that point you've just made about it taking a bit of time to sink in just how good Newcastle are. It's exactly the conversations that we were having in the car on the way back and that I've had with a few fans, because I think we kind of keep expecting them, not because there's a lack of faith in what they do or in Eddie Howe, to slip up, and yet they just keep doing the business. It's really, really, it's quite weird, isn't it, given where they've been? And we might talk about Eddie Howe's 12 months in charge later, but exactly 12 months ago he was watching them at Brighton, second bottom, I think, hadn't won, and then fast forward to today, third in the table. And yesterday, Sunday at Southampton, it wasn't one of their better performances, really. And yet they were clinical and clinical enough to win the game. And I think on reflection, it's probably the sort of match that a team that is serious and seriously good goes and gets a result in. Because when you're not quite at your best, the football isn't flowing in the way that it has done in other games. You've had to take your centre forward off at halftime because he's unwell. Little things like that. They still managed to produce a performance worthy of a 4-1 win. And I think that is such a gratifying outcome and such a really encouraging sign. So, yeah, not at their best, but great result. And I don't know about you, but I've looked at the league table quite a lot since last night. And it's lovely stuff, isn't it?
It is, and as you say, it will take a while to get used to. And I think, you made a very good point there. Obviously, we will talk about Eddie Howe's 12-month anniversary. This time last year, he came in, he admitted they were in a relegation battle. I think everybody's been surprised at the nature of the turnaround, how quick it's been. I mean, third in the table, a chance next weekend to go 9 points clear of Chelsea if they beat them heading into the World Cup break. Just how surprised have you been with the sort of timing of the turnaround, how quick it's been under Howe?
Yeah, it's been stunning, hasn't it? I think this season, before it started, 10th would have been progress because they finished 11th last year. So getting into the top half would have been, I think, a pretty big stride forwards. And we would all have loved a cup run as well. And that's realism. That's Newcastle fans being realistic, as they always have been. And we know that because we cover the club, we follow it, we understand it more than people who don't, who will talk about expectations. But as things have gone on, you start to believe a little bit more, and then you start to look up and see that other things are possible. And it's probably, I think, only since maybe the week when they drew with Manchester United, and all right, there were a couple of late chances, weren't there? But they were pretty comfortable. And then the Everton game, that I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, we might have to set our sights a bit higher here. So the speed and the rate at which things have changed has been remarkable. I mean, what a transformation, not just where they are in the table from having been bottom and in a relegation fight to now being third. And whatever happens against Chelsea, I think they'll be top four, won't they, when the World Cup starts? So they're going to be in the top four until at least Boxing Day, which is halfway through the season just about, which is sensational. Talking about that week when things turned, the three games, the Man United, Everton and Spurs, that's when I really started to take it seriously and think, oh, hang on a minute. But like I say, the speed that everything has changed in is something that they deserve great credit for, players and staff and fans who've gone with them on the journey as well, because it is a journey. I just thought it would be a bit of a slower one, and that wouldn't have been a problem because it's an exciting ride to be on. And yeah, like I say, the way things have transformed in the last year, I don't think anybody would have thought that they would go from this team that sat deep with a low block, that lacked confidence, that couldn't score goals, and even though they were defensive, was shipping far too many, to being a team that has scored this season, an average of 2 goals per game. Has still got the jointly best defensive record in the Premier League. I mean, by every metric possible, they've improved. And there's some of these like key points, key identifiers when you look at performance and how a team's doing. And Newcastle are coming out top or near enough top. It's absolutely incredible.
It is. It's a remarkable turnaround, and I think, you touched on it there. The belief is the big thing with Eddie Howe, isn't it? He, whether it's in the dressing room or in the interviews after, he makes it known that Newcastle can go and beat anyone. I think he really instills that in the players, and I think that's the mantra we've seen this season, obviously against Manchester City and Manchester United and Spurs, where they haven't sat back ever. They've really taken the game to these huge teams. Now, one thing we do know about Eddie Howe is that his feet will be kept firmly on the ground. You hear fans in the stands singing that Newcastle are going to win the league, and us in the media are starting to maybe think that Europe is possible. Howe's never going to come out and say that, but do you think internally him and his team are thinking we've got a huge chance now to finish at least in the top 6?
Well, yeah, I think they probably will know that. I mean, they'll be aware of where they are and how well it's going. Like, why wouldn't they be? But yeah, the messages that you'll get from them are that they just have to be realistic and not get carried away. And that's what you'd expect them to say. If we're still having this conversation in March and April and in the final month of the season, then, maybe you might hear different things. Maybe by that point, they could have qualified for Europe anyway. I think it will be really interesting to see what happens when January arrives. Because like I say, they'll be in that top 4 now during the World Cup break. So then Leicester, Leeds and Arsenal, just after the turn of the year, will be 3 different difficult tests when they come back. Now, if they can maintain it or improve, brilliant. If maybe they drop off a little bit with results, then, there's an argument both ways for additional investment in January. But I think that could be the key to turning what is an exciting and fun and enjoyable and promising season into something that could be truly memorable with, hopefully for Newcastle, European football at the end of it.
I mean, we're certainly all hoping that's the case. Like you say, I think we probably won't hear that from Howe until very, very deep in the season if they're still in that position. Let's talk about Sunday's game then. As we've both touched on, it probably wasn't Newcastle's finest performance. They've had a couple of matches this season where you think they probably haven't been at their best level. They still managed to sort of either grind out wins or actually sort of, completely emphatically beat teams. Yesterday at the start of the game, it looked like one of those games where it just wasn't clicking at the start. Newcastle struggled to break Southampton down. They were dangerous on the counter, the home side. At the start of the game, before Miggy opened the scoring, did you get the feeling that it was going to be, quite a tricky afternoon for them?
Yeah, I did. And even though Southampton were in the bottom 3 yesterday before the match started, they're a young team with a lot of energy. And I think that makes them dangerous opponents. I know they have their limitations. Obviously, that's why they're at the other end of the table, but they do have some good players as well. We all know how good Ward-Prowse is. I think he's a player a lot of Newcastle fans would have liked the club to go for over the last year. So, there's one example, but there are others in their team who can be dangerous. And the goal came at a really good time, didn't it? And actually, in commentary with John Anderson, we were discussing Southampton's vulnerability at the back, and there were a few moments before Almiron scored that they looked a bit shaky and a bit unclear about how they were doing things. That they'd made a couple of changes defensively as well. And yeah, I think the goal probably took away some of their belief. But then they started the second half with a bit of positivity and a good tempo, Southampton. So the timing of Newcastle's next 2 goals was absolutely critical, wasn't it? Wood, lovely finish. And then 4 minutes later to turn 2-0 into 3-0, just killed it with Willock's goal. Set up brilliantly by Trippier. That was top class play to get the ball and then to roll it through. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, good teams go and win those games. Top teams win those games and win them well and just put it to bed. And then, well, they just capped it off with the 4th goal. brilliant strike from Bruno from distance. I think the Southampton goal, the consolation goal, which was well taken, would have been a real frustration for Newcastle, because obviously they were hoping to protect that clean sheet, weren't they? So to go and get a fourth and just re-establish that 3-goal cushion, I think was nice at the end. Probably removed a little bit of the irritation at conceding a goal. But overall, just like I say, it was a performance that was clinical in front of goal and good enough to go and win 4-1 away from home. And I just think it's another sign that this team is going places.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think, like you say, the manner of the way they sort of put that game to bed in the second half was really sort of testament to what Eddie Howe was doing, that, you know, they're really punishing teams. 4 shots on target yesterday, 4 goals. The man who started off, Miguel Almiron, there's a brilliant comment here in the comments on Facebook by John Steele. He says, loving Razor's commentary at the minute, especially when Almiron scores. He sounds more shocked than us. Now, is there much
Thanks,
truth
John.
to that? Are you still a bit surprised when he scored? I mean, you keep thinking that the run's going to come to an end, and it just doesn't. He's absolutely flying at the minute, isn't he?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, initially, the goal at Fulham, wow, there was shock all around Craven Cottage after what he did, but a sensational finish. Got the match of the day 2 goal of the month on Sunday night, didn't it? Deservedly so. He's got to get Premier League goal of the month. He's got to get player of the month. There's something wrong if he doesn't. So yeah, initially the shock, but also delight. But then the fact that it continued, it's sort of strange, isn't it? Because even though he's given a lot to the team and everyone has always loved him, just because of the character he is and the work rate, apart from anything else, this side of the game hasn't been there. And again, Ando often says during the matches, when Almiron's got time to think about something, that's maybe when the end product isn't there. Well, he scored first-time finishes, Fulham, Everton was another, but he's scoring goals now where he has got time to think about it. He did it at Villa, and I love the way he cut in and bent it in. And then at Southampton, well, there was a defender. I'm not quite sure what they were doing. It was a strange attempt at a tackle, but he's got one thing in his mind now, Almiron, and it's to head for goal and to score. And I think it's confidence, isn't it? Confidence plus ability. And look, when you're on a run, things maybe are just a bit easier. So yeah, there's probably a little bit of surprise that it keeps going, but only because you think that, all good things come to an end. But look, you wouldn't put it past him scoring again this week, would you? In either or both of the 2 games that they've got. It's a remarkable run. I think everyone's just really pleased for him. But the serious point, it's taken some of the pressure off the other players. Without Callum Wilson for a while, and even though most of Almiron's goals, well, all of them, apart from Manchester City, have been when Wilson's been back from injury, they're less reliant on him now. If he doesn't get a chance, if he doesn't score, it'll come from another source. It'll be Almiron. Same with Bruno when he's scoring. So it's important to the team for that reason. Yeah, I'll try not to sound so shocked next time he puts one away, whenever that is.
Well, potentially Saturday, you would hope, maybe against Chelsea. But I think that's the point. Everybody's so delighted for him. He's always given a lot for this football club. He grafts and grafts every week. Fans were really behind him from the first minute. And what I think is quite telling now is when he scores and how many of the team go over and celebrate with him, and just the feeling of the fans. It has taken the pressure off the other attackers, because, his end product last season, he scored 1 goal, he had no assists, and now he's a real key member of this attacking side. So long may it continue. A man you just mentioned there, Callum Wilson, obviously he raised a few eyebrows when he didn't come out for the second half. A lot of people, I'm sure Gareth Southgate included in the stands, was a bit concerned. We do now that he was obviously just a bit unwell through in the week. The start of the second half, as you mentioned earlier, Southampton looked to pick up a bit. They were, quite going forward. At the start of the half, they were looking quite dominant until Chris Wood's goal. We've seen it quite a lot with Newcastle when Wilson isn't playing. The style of football that they play suits him really well. When he's not on the pitch, maybe that's when it doesn't work so well. Did you think second half that actually Southampton could potentially come back into the game?
Yeah, we were all worried about Kieran Trippier at half-time, not Callum Wilson. So when when we saw Wood getting ready, obviously we knew there was a change coming, but it
You thought he
was
was going right back.
yeah, it was a surprise. We were thinking, how are they going to shuffle this around? And Wilson, yeah, when he didn't return, you're right. There's, the alarm goes off, doesn't it? Because you're panicking for Newcastle, but also for him with England, because I really hope he goes to the World Cup. I think he deserves to. He's desperate for a shot at it, and we'll find out later this week whether that's the case. And also, like you say, Aaron, with Gareth Southgate being there, you're right. That's not a time to go off injured, isn't it? But Eddie Howe, as you pointed out, said that Wilson was just feeling lightheaded, having not been too well during the week. And yeah, I mean, it was something that came up last season a lot during Wilson's 4 or 5 months out with the calf injury when Wood was playing. Do Newcastle play to Chris Wood's strengths? Are they not set up better for a different type of centre forward? I mean, yesterday it ultimately didn't matter because they got those goals. What was it? Maybe 10 minutes after coming on, I think. Wood, something like that, to make it 2, and then the third from Willock soon after. So that killed any hope of the Southampton fight back. But yeah, they do have to play in a different way when Wilson isn't there. When Wilson is there, you realise just how good he is. And what he brings to the team. He can do it with his back to goal. He can be physical. He'll engage defenders. He'll get in a bit of a fight if he needs to. But he can run the channels. He can run off. He can go in behind. I mean, look, he can do everything. Wood is a different type of player. But everyone, again, I'm talking about how pleased they are for Almiron. They're all delighted for Chris Wood, who is a really nice guy and always a nice person to speak to interview after the games. And he's certainly grafted for Newcastle, worked really hard, and he's come up with some important goals as well. I mean, you think before that he scored Southampton this season and last season, the winner against Wolves from the penalty spot, and then the winner at Tranmere in the Cup. Those are goals that have mattered, that have really counted for something. And he knows he's not first choice, but you'd think that he'd probably get a chance on Wednesday, regardless of how Wilson is, because that's an ideal opportunity to play him and maybe just hold Wilson back for Chelsea.
That's the thing with Chris Wood, isn't it? He came in January, there was a lot of pressure on his shoulders, especially when Wilson got injured. And, it's safe to say it hasn't probably worked out as he would have wanted. But yesterday, I thought the way he took that goal, it was like watching the Chris Wood of Burnley days. He was so confident, wasted no time swiveling in with a great finish. And as you've pointed out, there was a lot of players delighted that he got the goal. The fans are delighted for it. He's seemingly got a lot of confidence off the back of it. He's talking last night about he wants to start on Wednesday. You have alluded to it, but how pleasing is it for him to finally see him actually, getting another goal in the league?
I think everyone's been willing him on and been rooting for him. The fans are supportive of the players. They want them all to do well. And look, if you're a striker and you're not scoring, then there will be some analysis of your performance and other contribution to the team. Eddie Howe had been very keen to point out last spring, before Wilson came back, that Wood actually does a heck of a lot for the team, that's unselfish, that's off the ball, that supporters will see. So even though there hadn't been a huge number of goals last season, there'd been something that was valuable to the side and helped their effort as they got away from the relegation zone. I was really pleased for him. I mean, it was just a good swivel. And right into the corner, so very accurate finish. And like you say, he was prolific for Burnley, to an extent, I suppose. He was their main goal threat. They did have others. He did well in the Premier League for them. There might have been some Newcastle fans that would have thought he'd have been a good option for them a few years ago, and they had to spend big to get him. But those were the terms. They needed another striker last season, and I do think he can still play a role this season. And the League Cup, and if they have a run in one or both of the cups, that's an opportunity for players like Wood, isn't it, who are desperate for game time. He has featured in most of the matches this season. When you look at it, he hasn't played in all of them, but I think all bar one or two he's been on the pitch for, even as a late sub. So Eddie Howe has used him and turned to him at times, and that might be from the start on Wednesday, and hopefully he'll get another one.
Yeah, as you say, he maybe hasn't done it in front of goal, but he certainly has played a huge part in that team. He defends from the front, he tries to press, and which Eddie Howe wants from his attacking players. And I think if they can just keep using them, just keep getting little bits out of them between now and the end of the season, I think, that £25 million price tag might not look as pricey as it currently does at the moment. But, obviously, as plenty of fans are saying here in the comments, delighted to see him back on the score sheet. Another player back on the score sheet who, for me, has been one of the massive improvers of late, and that's Joe Willock. Newcastle obviously killed that game in quick fashion, 2 goals in 4 minutes. Beautiful assist from Kieran Trippier, who we'll touch on a bit later, as just seemingly having his best run of form ever. How impressive have you been with Willock in recent games? Because it does feel like ever since Fulham away, he's stepped up in this team, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you've seen him as well, Aaron. You've watched the games, and just how central he's been to Newcastle's success since October began. With all the points they've picked up and on that unbeaten run. The only thing that's been missing for Willock before yesterday was a goal, and it was 22 games I counted without scoring in a Newcastle shirt since February at Brentford. And similar sort of opportunity for him when he was at Brentford. Was played through by Cher and went and put it in the top corner, and I thought he was going to do the same at Southampton. But in the end, he just sort of prodded it in with his toe, didn't he? And just past the goalkeeper's reach. Really pleased for him. He looks like a player who's enjoying himself, who I think feels as though he has an important role in the team, but is also supported by the manager and his staff. I think that's crucial. I'm pretty sure he made comments of that nature in the match day program a few weeks ago, how he's just happier in himself and he feels more settled, but also he's got a good relationship with Eddie Howe off the pitch as well, which has been, I think, critical to his improved form. The 7-in-7 in front of goal during his loan spell was probably never going to be repeated, but he can offer so much to the team. He's athletic, and that gets him around the pitch. And if he's creating but also scoring goals, then he's going to nail down a place in that team. And also, just in general terms in midfield, you look at Shelby having been out with injury, but coming back now and having come on in the last 3 games. And Longstaff, who's played a very big role recently and has been excellent. And that's really pleasing to see as well. Many people's midfield at the start of the season might have been Bruno on the right, Shelby deeper, Joe Linton left. Well, only one of those 3 played yesterday. Bruno will always start, but with Joe Linton suspended and coming back, and now Shelby fit again, it's going to be some tough choices to be made there. The World Cup break will mean that they don't have to be made for a few months, but the midfield, just the setup's been interesting because that 3, Willock, Longstaff and Bruno, have worked so well together to the extent, Aaron, recently, as you know, Joe Linton's had to play a lot on the left side of the attack because it couldn't quite get him into the midfield. And I think that is an endorsement of how well Willock and Longstaff and Bruno have been doing together in recent weeks.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Not many people would have expected that to be the midfield 3. And Eddie Howe, he likes to stick to his guns after wins. He doesn't make too many changes, and he's put a lot of trust in Willock and Longstaff, who have repaid him in bucket loads. Now, Longstaff, for me, people who listen to this podcast regularly know that I've tried to defend him at quite a lot of stages. He splits opinion among the fan base. A lot say that, his negative is that he doesn't do enough with the ball, but the positive undoubtedly is the work he does off it. And I think that's why Eddie Howe loves him so much and has given him so many minutes this season. And yesterday he was awarded man of the match. As you say, he didn't score, he didn't really assist, but his work off the ball is just absolutely crucial to this team. How impressed have you been with him both yesterday and in this season?
Yeah, very much so. I'm really happy for him as well, as I think, well, I can see you are, especially as you've defended him against some of the critics. But like I said earlier, like the fans just want the players to do well, don't they? And they support them as individuals. And we saw his potential 4 years ago when he broke through into the first team. And for a few months, he was hitting the heights, and then an injury came, and then he went backwards after Rafa Benitez left. There's no doubt about it. Eddie Howe has done a lot of work with him and has spoken about doing a lot of work with him because he sees that it's in there and rates him as a player. But he also talks about his energy and work rate. and how he can get around the pitch and what that gives to the team. And that has been, a really big thing for them, because they are a hard-working team. They're a team that plays with intensity when they press. They do it as a group from the front, and Longstaff's often part of that. So you've got to have energy. You've got to be physical. You've got to be able to get around to be in this Newcastle team now. And Longstaff will give you that, and he'll do it without complaint and with full commitment. I think we're also seeing more and more moments of quality from him. And you're right, he didn't have a chance at Southampton. He almost created one for Callum Wilson. There was that brilliant ball that he whipped in from the right. And maybe if Wilson had been 100%, he'd have got there. I think coming through the academy, he was always an attacking midfield player. And when he went on loan to Blackpool, he got 9 or 10 goals that season. Some of them were spectacular. And he scored 1 or 2 decent ones in a Newcastle shirt as well. I think he can offer them more in that more attacking role, more advanced role on the right than he can as a deeper player. One criticism of him from John Anderson in our commentaries is that when he's a bit deeper, if he gets it on the edge of the box, he sometimes gets caught on it. He's a bit slow to release it. Doesn't always have that problem when he's playing in a more advanced role. So I think that's one of the advantages of having him further forwards, and it would be nice to see him score a few more goals, because he is certainly capable of doing that for them. And there's, like I say, decisions to be made about midfield, because many of us have felt that's Bruno's best position where Longstaff is now. But another point Eddie Howe's made a lot recently, if you've watched his pre-match press conferences in particular, is that there's nice combination play on the right-hand side between Trippier, Longstaff and Almiron. They've got a good partnership. They're working together, and that is bringing out the best in all three of them. And obviously Almiron with goals has been reaping the rewards of that. And that's something that I don't think he really wants to break up, and you can understand why.
Yeah, I think that is spot on about the little combinations they have down the right. It's whether it's Bruno or Longstaff in that position. I think that's aided Miggy's sort of development, having those sort of triangles that they play. But Longstaff, as you say, delighted for him, an academy player, living his dream, and at one point maybe thought it wasn't going to work out under this new ownership. And I mean, he's currently starting every game, the team that's third. So I think that's silenced the doubters.
He's played in every game this season, and that just underlines his importance to Eddie Howe. And there's not many others that have done that in league and cup. So look, it's been great to see, and you'll be vindicated as well after sticking up for him. And it's nice, isn't it, when a player who's had a tough time and had criticism, and he's pretty self-critical as well. Like I think, like all players, if he's not playing well, he'll know it, and they come out of that stronger and better for it. That's really pleasing to see.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not often that I'm vindicated on this podcast, so I'll take it while I can, those small victories. Another midfielder that we've touched on, but not in great detail, is Bruno. Now, he obviously notched that 4th goal, brilliant finish. The thing with Bruno, and me and Andrew talk about a lot on this podcast, is that, he never seems to drop a level. And even if he puts in an 8 out of 10 performance, you suddenly think, "Ooh, that wasn't Bruno at his best," even though, it was a good performance. And I thought yesterday was probably one of his quieter games, certainly for the large stages of it. What did you make of him yesterday and that goal at the end to seal the game?
Well, I would agree with you in it. And also I'd say against Aston Villa, he had good moments, but he's had better games for Newcastle. And yet he's still integral to the team and the team's successes. He gives you, I don't think he drops below a certain level, and his level is really high. And there are things that he does that other players just can't do in that team. And we all feel more confident when Bruno's name is on the team sheet. So look, he's one of the first picks, whichever position in midfield he's in, because he's just so good. He's a special player, a top talent. I'm just so pleased that they have him. Yesterday, again, there were moments. There were a couple of moments where he nearly got caught on the ball, but he has this knack of being able to wriggle free and get out of tight situations with close control. He maybe a bit of strength as well. He's just an all-round quality midfield player. And that goal, where we sit for the commentary at Southampton, where all the media sit, you are quite a way along from the halfway line. Most grounds you're quite central, so you're roundabout on halfway, and you can see both sides like quite evenly, which I tend to prefer. Unless you're in an end where the away fans are, which is louder, and that's better on the radio for us because we're covering the game from Newcastle's perspective. In Southampton, we're a long way past the halfway line. We were almost in level with the 18-yard box at the end that Newcastle were attacking in the second half. So we had a close view of the goals, but the view that we had was side on, so we couldn't really appreciate how good Bruno's shot was at the time when he got it back from Sam Maxima after the short free kick. You know, it looked like it didn't look that powerful, like he just sort of stroked it in, and I couldn't quite see until I watched the highlights last night. That's actually a really good goal. He's sort of whipped it and bent it round low. Such an accurate finish, right into the bottom corner. And talking about Almiron with goals, Bruno brings goals as well, and that wasn't what they signed him for, but it's it's been a bonus, and third of the season yesterday.
Yeah, very welcome bonus to see him adding goals from midfield. As you say, he just has these little moments in games where he lifts it. And I mean, Hasenhuttl yesterday sort of singled him out for praise after the game. And it was weird thinking that actually he wasn't probably, the best player on the pitch, but he still sort of takes those headlines. Fantastic performance, obviously wrapped up with that goal. One player we haven't really touched on, and I think we should, is that of Kieran Trippier, because I think everybody's hearts were in their mouths when he pulled up with that hamstring injury just before half-time. Again, Gareth Southgate probably covering his eyes in the stands. Bruno, in the eyes of many, will be the best signing from January. But, I mean, this Kieran Trippier, he looks as if, he's 22, 23. He looks like he's a spring chicken, and he just brings so much to this team, both in attack and in defence, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's a high-quality player, and I'll admit, we've all seen him over the years for Spurs, England, maybe Atletico. I didn't realise or fully appreciate how good he actually is until seeing him in a black and white shirt. And this season, he just gets better and better. I think, again, a bit like with Bruno, and I would also throw Sven Botman in there as well, who is yet to taste defeat because he didn't play at Liverpool. So he's never lost. Or Newcastle's never lost when he's been on the pitch. I'd say we're lucky to have them in the Newcastle team because they are elite level players. And Trippier, defensively, he's just got that. He's just got a bit more than players we've seen in the past. He has that edge to his game. Positionally, he's always in the right spot, just about. But he loves to play forwards as well. There's the free kicks, but actually, and I don't have them off the top of my head. But when it comes to chances created, certainly by defenders, but actually maybe in the Premier League generally, chances created from set pieces, Trippier is right at the top of the list for those. And he plays a significant role for Newcastle in the attacking third and attacking half of the pitch as well. As a leader, well, you can see the players all respect him and trust him. But what I thought was nice against Aston Villa, when Jamal Lascelles came on, Trippier was straight across with the armband, put it on, and the respect Lascelles' status and what he's done for the club through difficult times, even though he's not playing at the moment, and gave him that. So I think he's a smart player. He's intelligent. And when he pulled up, or thought he pulled up with that hamstring issue, there was real concern. Again, a bit like Wilson, because you don't want the players' dreams to be shattered. And you also think about it from Newcastle's point of view. And they were without him for so long last season as well, because of that injury. And that was a shame. And your point about his age, you just wish he was a few years younger. But as long as he can run around and get around a pitch, I just hope he's wearing a black and white shirt, because he is. He set it all going, didn't he, in January? And he's a special player.
Yeah, he is indeed. And I think, when it comes to England, obviously they've had a lot of fullback issues at late. I think now, touch wood all being well in the next two games, it should be a case of where he starts in that team, whether right back or left back, rather than if he goes at all. Should
just add, Eddie Howe said after the game, because we asked him how Trippier was, he said he was okay, but he just brought him off late on, put Manquillo on just to protect him. I guess if there was any problem with a hamstring, then he wouldn't have emerged for the second half, would he? And England, well, they don't have many fullbacks, do they? Either right or left, and Trippier can play both. Dan Burn can also play left back as well, can't he?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he'll be in the conversation later this week. We'll see.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Newcastle fans that listen to this podcast who have been on the Dan Burn train for a while. It just remains to be seen whether Southgate thinks the same later this week. But I think, yeah, we'll definitely have Trippier, hopefully Wilson, and obviously Nick Pope as well in that squad come Thursday. Now, well, look, we've talked till we're blue in the face about Newcastle and how good they are. Southampton, in the relegation zone. Ralph Hasenhuttl obviously sacked this morning, Monday morning. Kieran Kelly, our reporter, wrote in one of his analysis pieces last night that Hasenhuttl looked broken after the game by Eddie Howe's Newcastle United. Did it look like a man who was on the edge yesterday?
He always seems quite downbeat anyway, Ralph Hasenhuttl, whenever I've watched him. I think there are struggles at Southampton, whoever's in charge, because they don't have the power that other clubs, and I'm not just talking about clubs like Newcastle post takeover, but other clubs in the Premier League have when it comes to spending. They tend to go for younger players. I mean, they made 10 signings in the summer, and 4 of them were from Manchester City and 3 from Manchester City's academy, and they all played yesterday. There was the goalkeeper who is a little bit older. He's an Irish international, been out on loan, but 3 of the others, are young players, maybe unfamiliar names. And, that might help them in a couple of years. But I just think they were lacking maybe a bit of know-how up front, and, maybe 1 or 2 quality players in other areas. But they did have a couple of injuries. Kyle Walker-Peters, who is excellent fullback, wasn't available. And Tino Livramento, who you probably remember, came from Chelsea and was very good last season. He was only 18. He's been injured as well. So, Southampton might point to that. There's been pressure on Hasenhuttl, I think, because they've been in the bottom part of the table. They've only won once at home this season, so it wasn't a great surprise to see him lose his job. And I know reports were coming out last night that it was likely to happen. I just think it's difficult at Southampton. They've always been a team, I think, that's tried to play nice football, and in the darker times for Newcastle, when they were struggling, even at times under Rafa Benitez, but particularly Steve Bruce, when we went to Southampton or they came to St James's, I used to look at them and think, I wish Newcastle could play a bit like they do when they had Ward-Prowse and Romeo in midfield and Ings up front. And I think they've been a decent team over the years, but they're probably going to struggle this season, aren't they? Unless something changes significantly. Well, the manager's gone, so yeah, we'll see. Southampton used to be a bad place for Newcastle to go to. It used to be a pretty depressing destination. Certainly the Dell, but also St Mary's, and in recent years, well, it's been rather good, hasn't it, for them? Won 3 of the last 4 at Southampton, and only 1 defeat, and that was behind closed doors in recent seasons.
Yeah, certainly. Long may that continue, that record down there. Now, let's look ahead to Wednesday. Obviously, Crystal Palace in the League Cup. A big chance for Eddie Howe to rest some of these key players that have, been put under quite a lot of pressure with a lot of games in recent weeks. Obviously, we're expecting the likes of Chris Wood to start. John Joe Shelvey and St Maximum, do you reckon this is the perfect time to throw them in from the outset before the World Cup?
You'd think so, yeah, just because they're running out of games, and Shelvey got, a good chunk of time on the pitch, maybe about half an hour, something like that at Southampton. So Maxim has not played as much, having come off the bench in the last 2, but if they are going to change the forward line and Wilson doesn't play, then you probably want Sam Maxima in the team. Could be an opportunity as well, Aaron, for Elliot Anderson, who was brought on at Southampton. I think that was his 7th substitute appearance in the league this season. His only start for Newcastle competitively. It's been in the cup, so I'd like to see him play because I'm really excited about him, as I'm sure you are, and anyone watching this will be. And then Matt Targett, maybe, coming in at left back. I think he's been unlucky because he's been good for Newcastle. But obviously they want Burn in the team, and Burn is playing at left back, and can you really drop him because of how well he's done? Might see Lascelles as well. Fabian Schär, who I thought was very good, particularly in the first half at Southampton, has had a few knocks recently, bumps and bruises. So it might be one that he is rested for. Yeah, so there could be a handful of changes. I really hope they go through. Not least because on the radio at the start of the season, I tipped them to win the League Cup, and I got a lot of I got some reaction from our other presenters and pundits, and also from Sunderland fans who thought it was ludicrous. So reputationally, it would be good if they got through to round 4. I also think getting through to the next round of the Cup would actually be beneficial for them when the World Cup finishes, because the next round of the League Cup after this is in the week before Christmas. So I know they've got the friendly against Rayo Vallecano on the 17th of December. The following midweek, they would have a League Cup tie. And I think that would be good. They might still have some players away in the World Cup final, Brazilians or English players, or maybe both or others. But to have a friendly and then a competitive game before that Leicester match on Boxing Day, I actually think will be a really good thing for them. And of course, cup progress is what we all want to see the club make now. So it depends what Crystal Palace do as well. You know, they had a good win at West Ham at the weekend. I think they've got dangerous and exciting attacking players. It'll be tough. I'm glad it's at St James's and not at Selhurst Park.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I hope for your sake and for your radio prediction that obviously it comes true. But I think Eddie Howe's stressed, he wants to take this competition seriously. I think we'll see, quite a strong lineup with, decent first team players that are probably itching to get a go. Elliot Arneson, as you say, I've been crying out for him to get more game time in the league. And I think, as you say, it's a perfect opportunity, especially at St James's Park, to see what he can really do. Before I let you go, Matthew, I just want to get a prediction from you, and that is for Saturday's game. And it feels very, very strange that we're sat here and probably expecting Newcastle to do quite well against Chelsea. Certainly myself, I'm not afraid to say I think they will beat them, just given the manner of their performances of late. How do you see Saturday's game going?
Yeah, I've gone into a lot of games recently. I said this at the start, Aaron, that I thought, well, they can't do it again, can they? Surely not. And then they have. So, I'm guilty of maybe not believing as much as other people have. But I think also, actually, anyone who's followed Newcastle closely or who cares about Newcastle has maybe been conditioned into expecting things to go the other way because of what it's been like. And, they're at the start of the journey, and it's going to take some getting used to. So a game against Chelsea at home ordinarily would be, a big match, and you would have expected them to be set up defensively. I mean, they did that last season. It was between the Bruce and the Howe eras. Graham Jones was in charge, and they were in the game for about an hour. This weekend is totally different. Chelsea maybe experiencing some transition, some change with the new manager. They've had a couple of disappointing Premier League results. There's a massive opportunity for Newcastle there to go and get to 30 points from 15 matches, which would be a splendid return, wouldn't it? And it's well within their capabilities. I really hope they win in the cup first. I wouldn't be upset with a draw against Chelsea, depending on how the game goes. But I'm going to back them to win both games, and a few more goals. I'm going to go for 3-1 against Chelsea at the weekend, and 2-1 against Palace as well. And Almiron, I think, will score at least one of those goals that I've predicted.
Well, you'll just have to make sure you don't sound so surprised on comment that is the case, because John Steele in the comments won't be happy. But look, I can't believe we're sat here. As you say, a year ago, they hadn't won a game, and now we're predicting, well, in your case, we're predicting League Cup trophy parades and 3-1 wins against Chelsea. So, look, fingers crossed that happens. But I love the bold predictions. Thank you very much, Matthew, for joining us. Thank you very much to everyone who's tuned in live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And to those who are listening later on, we'll have more podcasts throughout the week, both before and after Crystal Palace and in the run-up to Chelsea at the weekend. Thank you very much for listening, and take care.